Elaine Pascale is known as the godmother of horror and the author of The Bloodlights, if nothing else. Eve, We've Enjoyed the Fruit, The Kitchen Witches, The Language of Crows, and The Solstice. When not writing, Elaine can be found on her paddleboard. Elaine, take it away.
Thank you, Elaine. I'm going to start in the middle of The Kitchen Witches and sort of bounce around a little bit. Nashville, Dakota lay chilled and dying on the operating table. This is not past life regression or a near-death experience. This was an actual case of dying, coupled with an actual case of having a story that was dying to be told. She hated the feel of the cold steel table beneath her naked butt. A part of her remained glad that she was covering said butt with her body weight, as she would hate for any cellulite to be exposed to strangers. The other part of her was concerned about the strange fingers that were being shoved into the side of her neck. How are those fingers getting through her skin? How is it possible that her throat was a gaping open wound? Vainly, she hoped that her cheek implants were holding up well despite the recent trauma she had undergone. The implants were her newest surgery, and she would never be able to trust some mortician to fix them if they were drooping. She also hoped that the harsh hospital lighting was kind to her expansive forehead, which had recently been Botoxed. Her plasticware empire that she had used to stash secret supplies of snacks and secret supplies of secrets had nothing on the silicone and toxins inside of her. Nash wondered where the light was, the one they all mentioned being at the end of some tunnel that was populated by deceased loved ones beckoning you to the other side. Didn't that tunnel lead to heaven or some good place? Was the lack of light attributable to her still being alive or to the activities she indulged in before ending up on this table? Either way, this did not feel scary or bad. It simply felt like nothing. And nothing was good, especially after all of the chaotic, catastrophic somethings of recent. Was this what it had been like for those she had watched die? Had there been no pain, only nothingness? If she had ever felt guilty, she would have assuaged herself of that feeling due to the nothingness as she lay on the cold steel table with fingers penetrating a slit in her throat. Nash, with her flair for the dramatic, remembered her wound and considered it a near decapitation. While a deadly blow, much too much of her Cartier-wearing neckline remained intact to warrant such a description. But this might not be so bad. Death, the final finality, could certainly cement those skeletons in her closet and prevent them from rattling their bones further. But if she died, who would pack the lunches? Who knew as well as she how to disguise the protein she magicked into one plain brown bag and one Patriot's lunchbox for the kids' consumption at midday? And who would help Dinah survive high school? A girl needs her mother for help with the boys and the mean girls and the makeup and the manipulation. As she lay on the cold table, Nash recalled Dinah and the blood and the gun. She remembered all she had done to cover up all Dinah had done. She could not abandon the girl when she so clearly needed help. Who else could provide motherly advice? And the taxes. Who would do the taxes? Death and taxes. They were right. Those two items were eternally intertwined. Even when one was on the path between worlds, taxes loom large. If anyone saw her private papers, if anyone knew what and who she had buried over the years, she had to force herself to live in order to make sure her tracks were firmly covered. If she died on the table, she'd be leaving them to a poorer life. How would Derek afford Riley's braces without her? The poor sap would honestly try to pay the orthodontist instead of making the doctor pay for all of his indiscretions. They'd be sunk for sure. All that precious money wasted on teeth? Teeth are so easily knocked out, so easily ripped from the roots, so easily separated from skulls. It's a crime to allocate household funds to them. As Nashville thought of crime, she began to remember how she got here. Worse, she remembered that Derek had not been around to bumble through their tax accounts or to believe that he was floating cruises and canapes, Jimmy Choos and champagne, Ferraris and filet mignon. He had not been around at all. A few weeks prior, she'd gotten everyone off to school and then had gone to the Eco-Organic Mart for a reasonably large grocery order. Even though she'd very, very recently done a medium-sized order, and even though her kitchen refrigerator and basement freezer were drowning in sustenance. Her food regimen at that time required that she purchase food items daily and then practice self-denial. the habit of suffering might ultimately suit her. She stored non-perishables in glass jars like some ancient apothecary. Crystal vases held bouquets of Cheerios and pastas. Vials contained spells of rice, flax, and beans. And her plasticware, that contained the most precious things she owned or acquired. First things first, Nashville, Dakota was not the island impaler. Everyone who was anyone had been to the landing that summer, picnicking, sailing, sipping fruity drinks, and leaving traces of their DNA everywhere. It is true she had known all the victims. Furthermore, the 3 women whose bodies had been found had each hosted a plasticware party as part of Nash's multi-level marketing LLC, and each had been robbed of her individual profits at some point in the time following the party, but preceding her impalement. And it is true that the instrument of impalement was none other than the sharpened drivers that matched the golf sets that were offered as prizes in the Putt for the Butt auction to raise money and awareness for pre-prom liposuction. None of this proved anything, and Nash had been able to explain her innocence over afternoon tea with the chief of police. While Nash sipped her cappuccino, she noticed a piece of plasticware trapped amongst the thorns of one of her rose bushes. Feeling independent, she did not call for her gardener, but went into the yard to retrieve it herself. Had it been another item, and not the prized plasticware with matching lids, each set comprised of 20 pieces, from colanders to cups to cereal bowls to freezer squares to dessert containers and Jell-O molds, each container nestled inside one just slightly larger with leak-proof, watertight, freezer-safe, microwave-compatible lids, she would not have been so motivated. This particular container was meant for sandwiches. It had a diagonal divider down the middle to prevent separate halves of the meal from touching the other. It also had minuscule holes in the lid to allow for the color-coordinated toothpicks that were included. Instead of spearing deadly carbohydrates, lettuce, tomato, and deli meats, these picks held down a note which read, "Winning is not everything. It is the only thing. If you want to see Derek again, you will lose it all, heads and tails." Nash was no stranger to blackmail, but kidnapping was new. She would have never sunk to that level. There was a certain hierarchy to crime, and holding someone against his or her will for profit announced a lack of class and creativity. How dare someone take her husband in an attempt to terrorize her in his absence? First things first, Nash was not about to lose heads or tails. She would win by rescuing her husband and making his kidnapper pay. At that time, Nash believed she would tackle this trial flawlessly. Looking back from the benefit of hindsight on a hospital operating table, she was willing to admit to a modicum of defeat. For a woman so consumed with control, the weeks that had led up to the hospital had been beyond nightmarish. Not only had she been forced into a husbandless state, she had also been faced with catastrophe incarnate. First, the spiders. And I will be giving away a copy of my novella, The Bloodlights. Thank you.